It was a warm Friday evening in February, the kind of Canberra summer night that arrives soft and still. The heat of the day bleeding slowly out of the bitumen, the air thick with the smell of dry grass and eucalypts drifting in off the hills. Somewhere behind her, not far, barely a kilometre, the Royal Canberra Show is still going. She can probably see the glow of it above the tree line if she turns around. The Ferris wheel's still turning, the sideshow barker's still calling. The whole city seems to be out enjoying itself on opening night. The way it does every year. The way it always has. But she's not there anymore. She's here. And her white Mini has rolled to a stop on Parks Way. Not parked, just stopped. Coasted to the gravel shoulder with nothing left in the tank. The engine gone quiet in the middle of a breath. The road ahead of her is wide and dark, cutting through the open parkland on the western edge of Lake Burley Griffin. There are no street lights, no houses, just the road, and the water somewhere off to her right, invisible in the darkness, but present. She can feel the coolness coming off it, hear the faint lap of it against the bank below. She gets out of the Mini. The night air's warm in her arms. In her handbag, left on the passenger seat, or carried with her, we don't know, is a small silver bracelet, engraved with a friend's name. She bought it at the show just over an hour ago. It's a gift, just waiting to be given to a precious friend. She looks up the road, and ahead of her, already parked on the gravel verge, is a dark, coloured sedan. It's got New South Wales number plates, and there's no movement visible inside. It's just sitting there, waiting. She begins to walk toward it. Welcome to Strewth, a podcast about the Australian mysteries that leave you saying exactly that. Cases drawn from the true history of this country. Told without embellishment, because the truth is always more disturbing than anything we could invent. And today we're in Canberra, the national capital, the planned city, the city of wide boulevards and roundabouts and government departments. A city where in 1971, everyone seemed to know everyone, where hitchhiking was ordinary, where a young woman running out of petrol on a quiet road at night would not have thought twice about accepting a lift. Keren Rowland was born on the 9th of December 1950. She grew up on Berry Street in Downer, a quiet tree-lined suburb in the northern part of Canberra, the kind of neighbourhood where families knew each other and kids played out in the street until dark. She worked as a dental nurse and receptionist. She was slender with shoulder-length hair and by all accounts, she was a young woman looking forward to her future. She was close to her family and well connected to her community. Keren was a normal girl, Stephen Rowland said. Stephen, her younger brother, was just 16 in February 1971. We were a really close family, and everything was rosy up until she died. There's one thing to say about Keren's life in early 1971 that does require context, because context, as always with these things, matters. She was approximately 5 months pregnant. She had been engaged to the father of the child, but the couple had separated. In Australia in 1971, this still carried significant social weight. The stigma of single motherhood was real and corrosive, and it would follow her case long after her death in the form of false rumours that dogged the investigation and may, investigators later believed, have discouraged potential witnesses from coming forward. The 42nd edition of the Royal Canberra Show was one of the biggest nights on the capital's social calendar. Thousands of people turned out to Exhibition Park. Agricultural displays, sideshow alley, entertainment, livestock competitions, all the colour and noise of an annual tradition. And Keren was among them. While she was there, she stopped at a stall and bought that small silver bracelet. It was engraved with a name, Lynette, a gift for a friend. She slipped it into her handbag. She would give it to Lynette another day. After the show, the plan was simple. Keren would drive her white Mini back into the city centre, pick up her sister Christine, and the two of them would go to a party at the Statesman Hotel. It was a thoroughly normal Friday night for a young woman. But plans shift, and Christine decided to ride with her fiancé John and a group of friends. Keren would follow in her own car, and the two groups set off. A short way down the road, John glanced in the rearview mirror, and Keren wasn't there. He pulled over. He waited 10 minutes, perhaps 15. He drove to Keren's house to check whether she'd turned around and gone home, but she hadn't. As midnight approached, the family reported Keren Rowland missing to the ACT police. Officers found the car quickly. The white Mini was locked on Parks Way in Campbell, the wide arterial road that runs through the parkland beside Lake Burley Griffin. The petrol tank was bone dry. She'd simply run out of fuel here on this particular stretch of road at this particular hour of the night. Soon thereafter, a witness came forward. They'd seen something between 9 and 9:45 that evening, so perhaps within minutes of Keren's car rolling to a stop. They observed a slim female walking along Parks Way, walking toward a dark coloured sedan that was already parked ahead of her on the verge. It had New South Wales number plates, and it was the last confirmed sighting of Keren Rowland. And frighteningly, what investigators would discover in the days that followed, something that cast a very different light on that waiting car and its New South Wales plates. This was not the first time someone had seen that vehicle on Parks Way. So now we go back to Tuesday the 23rd of February 1971, 3 days before Keren Rowland will run out of petrol. The evening's warm. The parkland's quiet. A woman's walking along Parks Way, the same stretch of road, the same open parkland either side, the same black water of the lake just out of sight to the south. An ordinary, quiet Tuesday night in Canberra. She's done this walk before. There's no reason to feel anything other than ordinary. And then she hears it. A car slowing behind her. Not passing, slowing. The crunch of tyres easing onto the gravel shoulder, drawing level, stopping just ahead. It's a dark coloured sedan, New South Wales number plates, and the window starts to come down. There's a man inside with a hat on his head. He speaks to her, and something in what he says, something in the way he says it, or maybe it's in the stillness of his hands on the wheel and the steadiness of his eyes. Whatever it is, it makes the back of her neck go cold. She doesn't stop walking. She keeps moving, past the car, past the open window. Not running. She doesn't run, but not stopping either. Her feet finding their own pace faster than before. Not looking back until the car is behind her and the sound of the engine tells her it hasn't moved. she's so disturbed by this incident that she goes to the police and tells them what happened. And she's not the only one. More than one woman reports a similar encounter on the same road that week. The same dark vehicle, the same number plates, the same man with the hat. Each of them is alarmed enough to go to the police. Each of them describing the same thing. The car slows down, the window slowly rolls. A man who says something he shouldn't. Police are even able to identify him from the descriptions, and they bring him in. He tells them that his car was garaged on the night that Keren disappeared, and they can't find anything to directly contradict that, so there's not enough to charge him with. That man is never named publicly. Within the investigation, the officers give him a nickname drawn from those witness descriptions, from the one detail that kept coming up: Harry the Hat. He's never charged, but the witnesses are real. Their accounts are on record, and 3 days after those women walked away from his window and went to the police, a 20-year-old woman ran out of petrol alone on that same stretch of road at night and was seen walking towards a dark sedan with New South Wales plates. Whether it was the same car, the same man, the same hat, police were never able to prove it either way. Keren's father, Jeff Rowland, didn't wait for police to search for his daughter. He searched himself. He dragged lakes, he searched rivers, he walked gullies and drove backtracks through the surrounding bush country. He spoke to anyone who might have seen something. He refused to stop. He couldn't stop. Police conducted their own searches, of course. On the 5th of March 1971, they dragged Lake Burley Griffin. Search teams moved through the Borrow area near Tarago. They covered the road from Tarago to Galala. They searched the Doughboy Corner area on Kings Highway near Bungendore. Hundreds of square kilometres of the country surrounding the capital were examined, but they found nothing. For nearly 3 months, Keren Rowland seemed to have vanished. And all that time, 80 days of searching, of dragged lakes and walked gullies, and police teams fanning out across hundreds of square kilometres of the surrounding countryside. She was just 10 kilometres from where her car had been found. She was alone in the pines. Someone's walking the tracks in the plantation, an ordinary Thursday, the 13th of May, 1971. They're following a path that they've likely walked before. The roads are all familiar, the carpet of brown needles crunching underfoot. And except for that crunch, the particular quiet of a place where the trees absorb sound before it can travel too far. And through a gap in the canopy, the airport fence is visible to the north. Somewhere beyond it, the sound of a plane lifting off. And then they sense something. It's not a sound, not a movement. Something noticed at the edge of vision that shouldn't be there. A shape where the ground should be flat. An irregularity in the needle-covered earth between the rows. They step closer. The light between the pines is thin and dappled, and it takes the eye a moment to resolve what it's seeing. It's clothing. It's scattered, a trail of it leading deeper between the rows, and branches. Pine branches are broken from the surrounding trees. They're laid deliberately, covering something. The search that had covered hundreds of square kilometres on the countryside around Canberra was finally over. The Fairbairn Pine Plantation sits on the southeast edge of the capital, wedged between the airport precinct and the New South Wales border town of Queanbeyan. It's not native bush, not the dry eucalyptus and scrub that covers most of the surrounding tableland, but a plantation of introduced species, pines planted in ordered rows in the post-war decades. Their canopy so dense it turns midday into something close to dusk. The light filters through in pale columns. The needles underfoot muffle every sound. The rows stretch away in every direction, perfectly geometric, creating a disorienting sameness. Turn around twice in there, and every direction looks like every other direction. It was, in 1971, a place people used. Dog walkers, joggers, families cutting through on weekend afternoons, people who knew the tracks, who came regularly, who knew the plantation as an ordinary piece of Canberra's open space. Not far from the eastern edge, a simple stone memorial marks the spot where an RAAF Lockheed Hudson crashed on the 13th of August 1940, killing 10 people. 3 federal ministers among them on their way to a cabinet meeting. The memorial sits quietly among the pines. People walk past it on their way through. When investigators later learned that this place was frequented by walkers, the people came here regularly throughout those 80 days. They were, in the words of one detective, very surprised that she'd not been found earlier. It's May, autumn in Canberra. The air's cooler now than it was in February. The light's thinner. The afternoons are shortening. The pines hold their colour regardless, evergreen, unchanging, indifferent to the season, in stark contrast to the native trees around us. When investigators arrived at the scene, they found what the branches had hidden. Keren's belongings lay scattered along a trail from where a vehicle had apparently stopped to where she lay. Her clothing, her handbag, as if she'd been dragged. Her arms were positioned above her head. Torn pantyhose lay in the needles nearby. Empty beer bottles were scattered around her. The positioning of her body told a grim story of what had happened to her in this place. The cause of her death couldn't be established. The coronial inquest returned findings that were, in the words of those who examined the case decades later, inconclusive in virtually all respects. One thing was noted at the scene, and has never been forgotten by those who worked the case. Among all of Keren's belongings scattered through those pine rows, there was one thing that was missing. The bracelet. The silver bracelet engraved with the name Lynette, bought at the show on the night she disappeared. The gift that was never given. That bracelet has never been found. Keren Rowland was buried at Woden Cemetery in Phillip on the 31st of May 1971. She was just 20 years old. The investigation that followed was led by Detective-Inspector Reg Kennedy, head of the Canberra Criminal Investigation Division. Working with the tools available to police in 1971, witness interviews, door-to-door inquiries, physical searches, Kennedy and his team cast a wide net. Over the years that followed, more than 30 men were investigated as potential suspects. Within weeks of Keren's remains being found, a reward of $2,000 was offered, and by November 1972, that had been raised to $10,000. But no actionable information ever came forward. But something far more significant was bubbling behind the scenes. In 1972, a local woman came forward with information that potentially pointed investigators toward a specific individual. By October 73, Reg Kennedy made a statement to the Canberra Times that stopped the city in its tracks. He told the newspaper there was a distinct possibility police had found their man, a suspect he'd questioned twice, who had made what Kennedy described as startling admissions. He told the newspaper, "Police are reasonably satisfied the person we have interviewed has some very definite knowledge of the girl's disappearance and subsequent death." And then, the caveat that has haunted this case ever since. There is insufficient evidence at this stage, and because of certain circumstances, no charges are being proffered. Modern investigative journalism by journalist Nicole Overall has shed some light on what happened. The suspect was a convicted killer, a man then serving a life sentence in Goulburn prison. He'd been living in Canberra in 1971. He'd made admissions, he'd been questioned twice, but he had two alibis, people who insisted they were with him on the night Keren disappeared. Police also held the suspicion that the man may simply have wanted a few days out of prison, and that the admissions were strategic rather than genuine. Whatever the case, it wasn't enough. No charges were laid. And the case went as cold as a winter's night in Canberra. AFP investigators working the cold case in 2021 confirmed that this individual, who was definitively not Ivan Milat, who we'll come to shortly, remains on their persons of interest list. In their assessment, even decades later, he ticks quite a few boxes. But then there's the matter of evidence. At some point during the years the case lay dormant, a catastrophic policing failure occurred. Keren's clothing, her handbag, and all the physical contents recovered from the Fairbairn Pine Plantation were not properly preserved for future forensic review. And so, when DNA forensic science emerged in the mid to late 1980s, the technology that would revolutionise cold case investigation and has since solved murders decades old, the physical evidence that might have identified Keren's killer was already gone, degraded, unrecoverable. It's been described by those closest to the case as a critical policing error, which these days would be unthinkable. The fingerprints recovered from items at the scene were of insufficient quality for identification. The physical trail back to the killer was severed permanently by the failure to protect what had been found. And it's a failure the family has never forgotten. As I just alluded to, there's a shadow that falls across this case. A shadow so large and so well known that it demands to be examined carefully. The shadow of Ivan Milat. Ivan Robert Marco Milat was convicted in 1996 of the murders of 7 young people, backpackers and hitchhikers, whose bodies were found in Belanglo State Forest, roughly midway between Canberra and Sydney. He was sentenced to 7 consecutive life terms and died in prison on the 27th of October 2019, aged 74, never having confessed to a single murder. In February 1971, when Keren Rowland disappeared, Ivan Milat was 26 years old. He had a criminal record dating back to 1964. He was known to frequent the Canberra region, and his method, targeting young women, offering lifts, using remote forested locations, carries at the very least surface similarities to what the evidence suggests happened to Keren. But there is something more specific than surface similarity. On the 7th of April 1971, just 6 weeks after Keren disappeared, Ivan Milat picked up 2 18-year-old female hitchhikers near Liverpool in New South Wales. He drove them south on the Hume Highway, somewhere near Goulburn. He produced knives and threatened to kill them. He raped one of the women before they managed to escape at a petrol station. He was arrested and charged, but jumped bail and fled Australia, faking his own suicide before living in New Zealand for 2 years. He was only re-arrested in 1974. The rape charges then failed at trial and he walked free. 6 weeks after, Keren Rowland walked toward a waiting vehicle on Parks Way and was never seen alive again. Former New South Wales Detective Clive Small, who led the original Milat investigation, believed the connection to Keren's case was worth taking seriously. In 2019, as Milat lay dying in a prison hospital, New South Wales police detectives reportedly visited him, interviewing him extensively, urging him to confess to additional murders, including Keren's. But he died without saying anything. Task Force Air, the New South Wales Police task force that investigated Milat's crimes, examined Keren's case. When investigators searched Milat's property in 1994, they were specifically looking for, among other things of course, a bracelet engraved with the name Lynette, but it wasn't found. But as intoxicating and perhaps obvious as it is, the Milat connection requires caution. Many investigators and experts who know this case well consider the Milat connection a long bow to draw. The 1973 suspect, the convicted killer from Goulburn Prison who made startling admissions to Reg Kennedy, has been definitively confirmed as a different person from Ivan Milat, and the case has never undergone a full joint cold case review between ACT policing and New South Wales Police, meaning the Milat connection exists more as a persistent question rather than a seriously investigated lead. But what we can say is this: Ivan Milat was a man capable of exactly this kind of crime. He was in the right part of Australia at the right time. The patterns are real, but capability and proximity aren't evidence. And in a case already devastated by the loss of physical evidence, what is needed is something tangible. The Lynette bracelet was not at his property. No bracelet has ever been found. Milat's dead. And that particular avenue may be permanently closed. So for decades, Keren Rowland's case existed in that particular kind of purgatory, officially open but practically dormant. The evidence was gone, the witnesses were aging. The trail was cold in the most literal sense. And then in 2020, 2 things happened simultaneously that changed the story. Detective Senior Constable Emily Beer of the ACT Policing Unsolved Homicide Team began reviewing the original case files. She was prompted by someone who had come forward with fresh information. Although the details of what that information contained remain confidential, as police work requires. But the review was real, and it led somewhere. On the 8th of December 2020, 7 forensic officers returned to the Fairbairn Pine Plantation. They were equipped with modern metal detectors, technology that didn't exist in 1971, and they were looking for the bracelet. The search was announced one day before what would have been Keren's 70th birthday. And on that birthday, the 9th of December 2020, journalist and historian Nicole Overall launched the Capital Crime Files podcast. We'll link to it in the show notes. The first season of that podcast is entirely dedicated to Keren's case. Overall had been researching it for years, and what she produced was the most thorough modern account the case has ever received. interviews with Keren's brother Stephen, speaking publicly for the first time in half a century, conversations with AFP investigators, explorations of the evidence, the theories, the false rumours, and the strange folklore that has accumulated around the pine plantation over the decades. The ghost stories, the local mythology, the sense among Canberra residents that something terrible lives in those trees. It's important to add that Keren's case exists within a pattern that, when you look at it clearly, is profoundly disturbing. In 1974, 3 years after Keren's death, a 28-year-old Canberra mother of 3 named Mary Bertram left home and never returned. Her body was found 4 days later in bushland on the city's outskirts. Strangled, unclothed. Nobody was ever charged. In 1980, 18-year-old Elizabeth Herford disappeared after an evening at the ANU Union Bar. The circumstances are chillingly familiar. A young woman on a Friday night, the Lake Burley Griffin parkland around 9:30 in the evening, with Parks Way nearby. Elizabeth Herford has never been found. In 1984, 17-year-old Megan Mulquinney vanished after a shift at the Big W store in Woden Plaza, and she too has never been found. 4 young women, 4 cases, 1 small city, all unsolved. Whether these cases are connected, whether one person or a small number of people moved through Canberra's geometry for more than a decade, taking women, is a question that investigators and journalists have asked with increasing urgency in recent years. 2024 and 2025, New South Wales MP Jeremy Buckingham pushed for a formal parliamentary inquiry into dozens of unsolved homicides and missing women cases along the New South Wales coast from the late 1970s onward. The question of possible serial offending across the region has not gone away. It has, if anything, grown louder. No conclusions have been drawn, but the question deserves to be asked, and asked clearly. Did the same darkness that took Keren also take the others? And if so, does it still walk among us? One thing we do know, perhaps the only thing we have to cling to in terms of Keren's killer being brought to justice, is that there is a bracelet somewhere. That small silver item engraved with her name, Lynette, that was bought at a show on a summer evening by a 20-year-old woman who wanted to give her friend a gift. It's been missing for 55 years, and police believe whoever took Keren Rowland may have kept it as a souvenir. It might be buried. It might be in a drawer somewhere, in a house, in a city that still doesn't know what happened on that warm Friday night in 1971. And in this way, that bracelet has become the heart of the case. Whoever took it is the person that has the answer. Jeff Rowland died without knowing what happened to his daughter. He spent years searching, dragging lakes, walking gullies, driving backtracks, speaking to anyone who might know anything, and he never got an answer. If you have any information about the disappearance and murder of Keren Rowland, please contact Crime Stoppers on 1800 333 000. You can remain anonymous. Someone in Canberra knows the truth. And perhaps that someone's listening now. Strewth. Thanks for listening to another episode of Strewth. This one was a request from from Tugun and Sandy, who are long-time listeners to the show. They've been supporting me since I started, really. So a big thank you to them for pointing me in the direction of this important case, one that needs to be covered and spoken about. Thanks to everyone for the support, the kind messages, all the comments on the different podcasting platforms that you listen to the show on. It makes a huge difference. It helps me get the podcast out to a greater audience. So please keep doing that. Follow us on the socials. For those of you who are listening for the first time, we're here every Wednesday with another episode of Strewth, and occasionally I chuck in some bonus episodes as well. But the only way to make sure you don't miss anything is to hit subscribe or follow wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.